We'd hardly realized back then, amidst the void's beckoning call, that our discovery of that alien ship would mark the gruesome start of humanity's bitter end. Captain John Mitchell clasped the padded armrests of his command chair, eyes fixed on the view screen displaying inky blackness, pinpricked by stars like bullet holes through black velvet. Mitchell led a routine patrol mission through the desolate outer reaches of Seoul. The UESF Vanguard hummed along, her sleek hull stark against the cosmic dark. Mitchell's small-seasoned crew consisted of his first officer, Lieutenant David Reed, and Chief Engineer Michael Chen. Mitchell shifted his gaze. "Reed, any sign of those damned pirates in sectors 4 or 5? "No, sir," replied Reed. "Scopes remain clear, Captain." Suddenly Chen's console beeped. "Sir, I'm getting some strange long-range readings, an unusual energy signature. It's coming from a ship, drifting out there in the black." Mitchell rose and strode to Chen's station. "Derelict vessel, all the way out here?" "Yes, sir. But these power readings, they're like nothing I've seen, and that hull looks ancient, marked with micrometeor damage and cosmic rad scoring. But it still has juice somehow." Mitchell paused, then headed back to his chair. "Take us in, Reed, nice and easy, yellow alert." The Vanguard glided towards the alien craft, her floodlights sweeping across its battered surface. Suddenly the derelict came alive. Eerie lights flickered along its hull, shadows danced. An ominous chill ran up Mitchell's spine. "Sir," Reed stammered, "I'm not so sure about this." Mitchell leaned forward, adrenaline pumping. The alien vessel both enticed and unnerved him. Investigating it could change everything for mankind, unlock cosmic secrets, alter history's course. But what chilling dangers lurked within? One wrong move out here, and his ship and crew were nothing but frozen scrap and meat. Mitchell had to play this smart and careful. The Vanguard drifted ever closer, the alien lights flashing, the void yawning wide and hungry all around. Mitchell gripped his armrests hard enough to make the leather creak. What mysteries and nightmares would they find inside? He had to know, but he feared, deep down, that he might regret ever laying eyes on this derelict. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. As they pulled on their EVA suits, Chief Chen's voice crackled over the comms. "Captain, I must advise against this. We have no idea what's on that ship, the risks of contamination, the danger." "I hear you, Chen, but this is too important. We need answers. I'm not passing up this opportunity," Mitchell replied, sealing his helmet. With a hiss, the airlock cycled open. The void yawned before them, the derelict a dark blot in the starscape. Mitchell took a breath. "Move out." Thrusters flaring, the team pushed off, gliding across the gap. As they drew closer, the ship's surface grew more disturbing. Strange protrusions jutted from the hull, pulsing with eerie bioluminescence. Lights seemed to follow their approach, tracking them. They reached the airlock, bracing for resistance, but the door gaped open as if beckoning them inside. Mitchell exchanged glances with Reed. With a nod, they entered. Beams from their headlamps cut through a twisting maze of corridors. The walls seemed to undulate, biomechanical structures melding metal and flesh in a grotesque fusion. Their footsteps echoed too loudly in the oppressive gloom. Static hissed in Mitchell's ears. Whispers bled through the interference, alien words just beyond understanding. A chill crept up his spine. Davis's voice slashed through the haze. "What the fuck?" His scream ripped through the comms, agonized and terrified. Mitchell spun, helmet light falling on Davis. Some unseen force was dragging the corporal back into the dark, his fingers scrabbling uselessly at the slick floor. "Davis!" Mitchell leapt for him, caught only empty air. Davis vanished into the shadows, his vitals flatlined. Mitchell's heart hammered. Oh God, they never should have come here. This ship, it was alive, and it was hungry. Mitchell's head reeled in the suffocating darkness, his heart pounding like a jackhammer against his ribs. Davis was gone, vanished into the shadows without a trace. The captain's mind raced, desperate for answers, for some way to make sense of the madness they'd stumbled into. "We have to find him," Mitchell said, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to keep it steady. "We can't leave him behind." "We press on," Mitchell said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Stay close and keep your eyes open. Whatever took Davis, it's still out there." The trio moved forward, their footsteps echoing through the twisting corridors. The walls seemed to pulse with a sickly, organic light, casting eerie shadows that danced at the edges of their vision. Mitchell's skin crawled beneath his suit, a cold sweat beading on his forehead. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves standing at the threshold of a massive circular chamber. The room thrummed with an unsettling energy, the air thick with a palpable sense of wrongness. In the center of the chamber, a luminescent orb pulsed like a grotesque heartbeat, its light casting a sickly glow across the biomechanical walls. Reed raised his scanner, his hands shaking as he took readings of the strange device. "Captain, I'm detecting a massive energy spike coming from that orb. It's like nothing I've ever seen. It must be powering the entire ship." Mitchell took a step forward, drawn to the orb like a moth to a flame. He knew he should be cautious, that touching the alien device could be a death sentence, but something compelled him to move closer. As he approached, a holographic projection flickered to life above the orb, revealing a spindly, inhuman figure with elongated limbs and a featureless face. The alien spoke, its voice a guttural, otherworldly rasp that sent shivers down Mitchell's spine. He couldn't understand the words, but the creature's gestures were clear. It was beckoning them forward, inviting them to touch the orb. Mitchell hesitated, his hand hovering inches from the glowing surface. He knew it was a risk, that he could be walking into a trap, but what choice did he have? If there was even a chance that this could lead them to Davis, he had to take it. With a deep breath, Mitchell pressed his gloved hand against the orb. Instantly, a blinding flash of light engulfed the chamber, searing his retinas even through the tinted visor of his helmet. He felt a wrenching sensation, as if his mind was being torn from his body, and then he was falling, tumbling through an endless void filled with alien visions and incomprehensible knowledge. Back on the Vanguard, Chief Engineer Chen watched the boarding party's vital signs with growing alarm. Their readings were becoming erratic, their heartbeats spiking, and their brain activity fluctuating wildly. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, but there was nothing he could do but watch and wait, praying that his crewmates would find their way back from the nightmare they'd stumbled into. Mitchell's consciousness swam through an endless expanse of swirling colors and ethereal mist. His physical form felt distant, unreal, as if he'd left his body far behind. A presence coalesced before him, an ancient being of shimmering light and unfathomable wisdom. Images flashed through Mitchell's consciousness, vivid and haunting. He saw the Pakled at the height of their civilization, their cities gleaming marvels of technology and art. But a darkness lurked at the edges, a malevolent force that whispered seductive promises of power and knowledge. "We were consumed by our own curiosity," Vola continued, sorrow emanating from his ethereal form. "The void twisted us, corrupted our minds and our creations. We became its puppets, our once great society reduced to a nightmare of our own making." Mitchell watched in horror as the Pakled fell, their bodies and machines warping into grotesque abominations. Vola alone remained untouched, fighting against the void's insidious influence. "I sealed the void within the orb," Vola explained, "but the cost was great. My people, my world, all lost to the darkness." Desperation surged through Mitchell. "My crew, are they—" "They live," Vola assured him, "but they are in grave danger. The void's influence spread, seeking new hosts to corrupt. You must find them, and escape this cursed vessel before it is too late." Back on the alien ship, Reed and Johnson moved cautiously through the twisting corridors, their hearts racing with each step. The walls pulsed with a sickly organic light, casting eerie shadows that seemed to writhe with a life of their own. A low guttural moan echoed from ahead, sending chills down their spines. They exchanged a glance, weapons raised, and pressed forward into a nightmarish chamber. Grotesque creatures filled the room, their bodies a twisted fusion of flesh and metal. They had once been the Pakled crew, but now they were something else entirely, their humanity lost to the void's corruption. The creatures stirred, alerted to the human's presence. Limbs twitched and maws dripped with viscous black ooze. Reed and Johnson opened fire, the air filling with the stench of burnt flesh and the deafening roar of gunfire. On the Vanguard, Chen watched the alien ship with growing dread. The energy reading spiked, a massive surge that threatened to engulf the Vanguard itself. He tried to raise the boarding party, desperate to warn them, but the comms only returned static and eerie, inhuman whispers that made his skin crawl. Something was very wrong on that ship, and Chen feared that if the away team didn't find a way out soon, there might be nothing left of them to save. Mitchell reeled from Vola's chilling revelation, the weight of his inadvertent actions pressing down upon him like the cold vacuum of space. The orb wasn't just a prison for the malevolent void, it was a conduit, a gateway through which the entity could spread its corrupting influence across the cosmos. Mitchell's mind raced, grappling with the enormity of the consequences. By touching the orb, he had unwittingly set in motion a chain of events that threatened not only his crew but the entire universe. A sickening knot formed in his gut as the full gravity of the situation sank in. "Vola," Mitchell pleaded, his voice trembling with desperation. "There must be a way to stop this, to prevent the void from escaping. I can't let my crew, my ship, my entire species fall victim to this nightmare." The ancient Pakled hesitated, his ethereal form flickering with uncertainty. Mitchell sensed the being's reluctance, the deep-seated fear that came from eons of witnessing the void's destructive power. But beneath that fear, he saw a glimmer of hope, a resolve that had kept Vola fighting against the darkness for so long. "There may be a way," Vola finally spoke, his voice a ghostly whisper in Mitchell's mind. "But the path ahead is treacherous, fraught with dangers beyond your imagining. I can guide you through the ship's twisted corridors, help you navigate the horrors that lurk within. But you must be prepared to face the consequences of your actions, to confront the void itself if necessary." Mitchell nodded solemnly, his determination overriding the icy fear that gripped his heart. He would do whatever it took to save his crew and prevent the void's escape, even if it meant sacrificing himself in the process. Back in the physical realm, Lieutenant Reed and Sergeant Johnson fought desperately against the mutated Pakled abominations, their weapons blasting holes in the twisted flesh and metal. The air was thick with the stench of burnt flesh and acrid smoke, the echoes of inhuman screeches and the roar of gunfire filling the corridors. As they battled through the hordes, Reed and Johnson stumbled upon a room unlike any they had encountered before. The chamber was filled with strange, pulsating pods, each one emitting a sickly, bioluminescent glow. The pods seemed to throb with a grotesque parody of life, their surfaces slick with a viscous, translucent fluid. Cautiously, the two men approached the nearest pod, their hearts pounding in their chests. As they drew closer, the pod's contents became horrifyingly clear. Inside, fused with the ship's organic technology, were the twisted remains of a Pakled crew member. Its body was contorted, warped beyond recognition, a nightmarish fusion of flesh and machine. Suddenly, without warning, the pod burst open with a sickening crack. A gnarled, clawed hand shot out, followed by a body that was more abomination than Pakled. The creature's eyes, filled with an otherworldly madness, fixed upon Reed and Johnson, its maw opening to reveal rows of jagged, needle-like teeth. The creature spoke, its voice a guttural alien rasp that sent shivers down their spines. It pointed a twisted, elongated finger at the two men, its words incomprehensible but filled with malice. Around them the other pods began to shudder and crack, their contents stirring to life like a grotesque, perverted birthing chamber. On the Vanguard, Chief Engineer Chen watched in horror as the energy surge from the alien ship grew stronger, the readings on his console spiking to dangerous levels. The entire ship shuddered, the hull groaning under the strain of the anomalous forces at play. Chen knew he had to act fast, to find a way to sever the connection between the Vanguard and the alien vessel before it was too late. His fingers flew across the controls, frantically searching for a solution. But every attempt he made was met with resistance, the alien ship actively fighting against his efforts, as if it were a living, sentient being, hell-bent on dragging them all into the abyss. The engineer gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead as he redoubled his efforts. He couldn't let the Vanguard fall victim to the same fate as the Pakled ship. He had to find a way to break free, to save his crewmates and himself from the horrors that lurked within the derelict vessel. But deep down, Chen feared that it might already be too late, that the Void's influence had already taken hold, and that they were all doomed to be consumed by the darkness that had claimed the Pakled so long ago. Captain Mitchell stumbled through the twisting corridors of the alien ship, Vola's ethereal presence guiding him like a beacon in the darkness. The ancient Pakled's words echoed in his mind, the weight of the Void's threat pressing down upon him with every step. Mitchell's breath came in ragged gasps, his heart pounding against his ribs as he fought to keep his composure. Suddenly a wave of vertigo washed over him, and he staggered, his hands slamming against the biomechanical wall for support. Images flashed through his mind, vivid and terrifying. He saw worlds consumed by the Void, their skies blackened and their surfaces writhing with grotesque, twisted forms. Civilizations crumbled, their people driven to madness by the insidious whispers of the dark entity. "These are echoes of the Void's influence," Vola explained, his voice a ghostly whisper in Mitchell's mind. "The orb's connection to your consciousness allows the Void's memories to bleed through, tormenting you with visions of its past conquests." Mitchell gritted his teeth, his grip tightening on his weapon. "I won't let it happen again," he growled, his voice low and determined. "We have to stop this, no matter the cost." Volar nodded, his ethereal form pulsing with a soft, otherworldly light. "We must hurry. The Void grows stronger with each passing moment." In the pod room, Lieutenant Reed and Sergeant Johnson found themselves surrounded by a nightmarish horde of Pakled abominations. The creatures shambled forward, their twisted limbs twitching and their maws dripping with viscous black ooze. Reed and Johnson opened fire, their weapons tearing through the grotesque flesh and sending sprays of dark liquid splattering across the walls. But for every abomination they put down, two more seemed to take its place, the pods along the walls cracking and splitting open to release new horrors into the fray. Reed's heart raced, his finger tight on the trigger as he fought to keep the creatures at bay. Suddenly his eye caught a glimmer of something on the wall, a strange device covered in alien glyphs. Acting on instinct, he lunged for it, his hand slamming down on the glowing panel. A blinding pulse of energy erupted from the device, engulfing the room in a searing white light. The Pakled abominations let out a chorus of agonized screeches, their forms convulsing and twisting as the energy tore through them. To Reed and Johnson's surprise, the creatures began to dissolve, their flesh and metal components melting away into pools of thick black liquid. The two men exchanged a glance, their chests heaving with exertion and relief. "We have to find the captain," Reed said, his voice ragged, "and get the hell off this ship." Johnson nodded, his grip tightening on his weapon. "Lead the way." On the Vanguard, Chief Engineer Chen felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead as he approached the airlock connecting the two ships. The Void's presence was like a physical weight, pressing down upon his mind and filling his thoughts with dark, twisted whispers. He could feel the entity's malevolent influence seeping into his consciousness, tempting him with promises of power and knowledge. Chen shook his head, gritting his teeth as he fought to maintain his focus. He knew he had to act fast, to sever the connection between the ships before the Void's corruption could spread any further. With trembling hands, he began to arm the makeshift explosive device, his heart pounding in his ears as he worked. The seconds seemed to stretch into eternity as he set the charge, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. He could feel the Void's presence growing stronger, its whispers becoming more insistent, more seductive. Chen's fingers fumbled with the wires, his mind racing with thoughts of the horrors that awaited him if he failed. But he couldn't let that happen. He had to succeed for the sake of his crewmates and for the fate of the entire universe. With a final, desperate effort, Chen connected the last wire and armed the device. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Chen pushed himself away from the airlock, his heart pounding as the explosive charge detonated. The flash seared his eyes through his helmet visor. Shrapnel pinged off his suit. For a terrifying moment, He tumbled, disoriented, through the void. Then his suit jets fired, stabilizing him. Chen floated there, breathing hard, watching the ugly wound the blast had torn in the derelict's side. The alien ship listed drunkenly, venting atmosphere, sparks, and fluids into the void. Chen's stomach lurched with a mixture of relief and dread. Had he done it? Had he severed the link, the malevolent influence flowing between the ships? What about the captain and the others? Inside the alien ship, the deck shuddered violently beneath Mitchell's feet as the distant explosion reverberated through the hull. He and Volar staggered, nearly losing their footing. Mitchell's head snapped up, his eyes wide with alarm. Volar's ethereal form flickered, his voice strained. "Your engineer, he has broken the physical bond between our ships. A desperate gambit. I fear it may not be enough." Dread coiled in Mitchell's gut as they entered the central chamber. The cavernous space thrummed with eldritch energies that made his teeth ache. In the center, the orb pulsed and swirled with oily iridescence. Mitchell's heart seized. Jagged cracks marred the orb's surface. Tendrils of living shadow seeped out, probing, seeking. The orb was failing. The void was breaking free. "No," Mitchell breathed. "We're too late." "Not yet," Volar urged. "You must keep it contained. Place your hands upon the orb, focus your will. You are the only one who can hold the void at bay." His consciousness hurtled into a howling abyss, a maelstrom of primal hunger and malice. The void surrounded him, smothering, crushing. Gibbering whispers tore at his sanity. Nightmarish visions ripped through his mind. Worlds shattered, civilizations devoured, galaxies extinguished. The void's cruel laughter rattled his bones. It was everywhere. It was everything. Despair clenched Mitchell's heart. He was nothing before this. An insignificant mote, helpless in the face of the void's power. He couldn't stop this. It was hopeless. He should just let go, embrace oblivion. No. Mitchell gritted his teeth. He wouldn't give in. He thought of his crew, his friends, Davis, Reed, Johnson, Chen. He couldn't fail them. He wouldn't let this thing win. Rage ignited in Mitchell's chest. He drew on every ounce of willpower he had left and pushed back against the darkness. "Get out of my head!" The void recoiled as if burned. Mitchell pressed his advantage, rallying his faltering strength. "You won't escape. I won't let you, never." In the corridors, Reed and Johnson pelted headlong through the twisting passages, following the trail of destruction. The mutated Packlet had torn through here, ripping through bulkheads, shredding conduits and circuitry. Smears of viscous black fluid glistened wetly in the strobing emergency lights. Tortured metal groaned. The air grew thick with smoke and the stench of burnt meat. Reed's skin crawled. His neck prickled. Something was behind them. He glanced back. A hulking silhouette lurched out of the billowing smoke. Reed's blood turned to ice in his veins. It was a nightmarish fusion of Packlet and ship, a behemoth of gnarled flesh and twisted metal fused into one monstrous whole. Baleful eyes blazed with unholy light above a drooling, distended maw bristling with jagged metal teeth. The abomination roared, the bellow shaking the deck plates. Then it charged, its thunderous footfalls rattling Reed's bones. "Go, go, go!" Reed screamed. He and Johnson sprinted, their hearts jackhammering against their ribs. The monster galloped after them, its massive bulk tearing through the narrow passages like a wrecking ball. Serrated metal claws gouged the bulkheads. Gobs of stinking drool splattered the deck. The creature was gaining, fast. There was nowhere to run. They careened around the corner, nearly losing their footing. The weapons locker hung open, its door ripped off the hinges. Most of the racks were empty, but a few rifles remained. Johnson snatched one up and tossed another to Reed. They spun to face their pursuer, bringing the weapons to bear. The abomination skidded around the bend, its talons gouging the deck. Those hellish eyes fixed on them, blazing with malevolent hunger. The monster bellowed and lunged, its gaping maw yawning wide. Reed and Johnson opened fire. Muzzle flashes strobed. The bark of gunfire echoed deafeningly in the confined space. Slugs stitched up the creature's chest, pocking its twisted flesh and metal. Putrid ichor sprayed. The creature roared in pain and rage, but kept coming, heedless of the wounds pocking its hide. Reed's gun clicked empty. The monster bore down on them. It filled the corridor, blocking out the light. Its claws swiped for their faces. Its fetid breath washed over them, gagging. They were out of time, out of options. This was it. In the ethereal plane, Mitchell gritted his teeth, every fiber of his being straining against the void's relentless assault. Darkness clawed at his mind, lacerating his sanity with icy talons. Nightmarish visions of shattered worlds and broken souls buffeted him, threatening to drown him in an ocean of despair. But he clung to his humanity, to the memories of his crew, his home, the billions of lives hanging in the balance. They were his anchor, his lifeline in this storm of madness. Vola's presence surged beside him, a beacon of ancient wisdom and implacable will. The Paklid's consciousness merged with Mitchell's, bolstering his flagging strength. Together they pushed back against the void, their combined resolve a blazing lance piercing the darkness. Slowly, inch by agonizing inch, they drove the void back, its malevolent presence weakening, its hold on Mitchell's mind slipping. He could feel it writhing, snarling, fighting tooth and claw to maintain its grip. But under their unrelenting onslaught, its defenses crumbled, its power waning. Back in the central chamber, Reed and Johnson circled the abomination, their breath ragged, their grip slick on their weapons. The creature lashed out, its gnarled limbs whistling through the air, its maw slavering with ravenous hunger. They scrambled back, peppering it with ineffectual fire. The slugs pocked its twisted flesh, but the wounds sealed almost instantly, regurgitated metal fusing with puckered skin. Reed's mind raced, desperation clawing at his nerves. Then, like a lightning bolt, the memory of the podroom device hit him. His gaze darted around the chamber, searching frantically. There, on the far wall, a familiar panel, its surface pulsing with eldritch light. "Cover me!" he yelled to Johnson. Then he was moving, adrenaline surging through his veins. The abomination roared, lunging for him, its claws gouging ragged furrows in the deck. Reed jinked left, then right, narrowly evading its grasp. His heart hammered against his ribs. The panel loomed before him, tantalizingly close. With a burst of speed he leapt, his hand outstretched. The creature's jaws snapped shut a hair's breadth from his boots. His palm slammed down on the panel, fingers splayed across its pulsating surface. Blinding light erupted from the device, washing over the chamber in a searing wave. The abomination howled, an unearthly sound of agony and fury. Its flesh bubbled and ran like wax, metal sloughing away in molten rivulets. It thrashed and convulsed, its death throes shaking the very bones of the ship. Then with a final shuddering gasp it collapsed, its massive bulk sagging into a heap of twitching, oozing matter. Reed and Johnson stood panting, incredulous, as the orb at the chamber's heart spat a final defiant tendril of shadow before falling dark and still. On the Vanguard, Chen watched in mute horror as the derelict disintegrated, venting debris and atmosphere into the void. Dread clutched his heart with icy fingers. Were they too late? Had Mitchell and the others succumbed to the void's insidious grasp? Suddenly the comm crackled to life, Mitchell's voice tearing through the static, strained and urgent. The transmission cut off in a burst of feedback. Chen stared at the comm panel, his blood running cold. A final, haunting wail echoed through the bridge, a sound that would forever be seared into his memory. The death knell of the Paklid vessel, or something far, far worse. With shaking hands he reached for the controls, praying he wasn't too late. The stars outside blurred as the Vanguard leapt into the safety of subspace, leaving the derelict, and the horrors it contained, far behind. In the ethereal realm, Mitchell gritted his teeth, every fiber of his being straining against the void's relentless assault. Darkness clawed at his mind, lacerating his sanity with icy talons. Nightmarish visions of shattered worlds and broken souls buffeted him, threatening to drown him in an ocean of despair. But he clung to his humanity, to the memories of his crew, his home, the billions of lives hanging in the balance. They were his anchor, his lifeline in this storm of madness. Volar's presence surged beside him, a beacon of ancient wisdom and implacable will. The Packlid's consciousness merged with Mitchell's, bolstering his flagging strength. Together they pushed back against the void, their combined resolve a blazing lance piercing the darkness. Slowly, inch by agonizing inch, they drove the void back, its malevolent presence weakening, its hold on Mitchell's mind slipping. He could feel it writhing, snarling, fighting tooth and claw to maintain its grip. But under their unrelenting onslaught, its defenses crumbled, its power waning. In that moment of clarity, Mitchell knew what had to be done. The only way to truly seal the void, to prevent its escape and the destruction of all he held dear, was to sacrifice himself. To use his own consciousness as a conduit, drawing the malevolent entity back into the orb that had held it for so long. He looked to Volar, their minds linked, and in that shared gaze he saw understanding and grim acceptance. The Packlid knew the price of this act, knew that it would mean the end of his own existence as well, but there was no hesitation, no doubt in his ancient eyes. Only a steely resolve, a determination to see this through no matter the cost. Together they turned their focus to the orb, the artifact that had started it all. Mitchell could feel its power, the pulsing energy that thrummed through its cracked and splintering surface. He reached out with his mind, his consciousness enveloping the orb like a shroud. Volar joined him, their essences intertwining, becoming one with the ancient device. It was a strange sensation, a blurring of the lines between self and other, between organic and artificial. Mitchell could feel the orb's history, the weight of the eons it had endured, the countless civilizations that had risen and fallen in its presence. And then, with a surge of will, they began to draw the void back, pulling it into the orb like a black hole devouring light. The entity fought, thrashing and howling, but it was no match for their combined strength, their shared sacrifice. In the physical realm, Lieutenant Reed and Sergeant Johnson watched in horror as the orb pulsed and shuddered, its glow intensifying to a blinding white. They saw Mitchell's form, still linked to the artifact, begin to flicker and fade, his essence consumed by the hungry light. "Captain!" Reed cried out, his voice raw with anguish. But there was nothing he could do, no way to stop the inexorable process that had been set in motion. The alien ship shuddered and groaned, its structure crumbling around them as the void's influence withdrew. Chunks of twisted metal and biomechanical debris rained down, the once mighty vessel reduced to a husk of its former self. Reed and Johnson could only watch, their hearts heavy with grief and horror, as the last remnants of the ship disintegrated, leaving only the orb behind. It hung in the void of space, a small, unassuming thing, belying the immense power and sacrifice it contained. With trembling hands, they reached out and retrieved the artifact, cradling it gently as they made their way back to the Vanguard. The journey was a blur, their minds numb with shock and loss. As they stepped through the airlock, they were met by Chief Engineer Chen, his face etched with worry and confusion. But as he took in their haunted expressions, the absence of Captain Mitchell, understanding dawned in his eyes. "He's gone," Reed managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "He sacrificed himself to seal the void, to save us all." Chen closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging under the weight of the revelation. He had known Mitchell for years, had served with him on countless missions. To lose him like this, to a threat they had barely begun to comprehend, it was almost too much to bear. But there was no time for grief, no time for mourning. The Vanguard was still in danger, the alien ship's destruction sending shockwaves through the system. They had to get out of here, had to put as much distance between themselves and this cursed place as possible. With a heavy heart, Chen turned to the ship's controls, his fingers flying over the console as he plotted a course back to Earth. The jump drive hummed to life, the stars outside the viewport blurring and stretching as the Vanguard leapt into the safety of subspace. In the silence that followed, the crew of the Vanguard could only sit and stare, their minds reeling with the events of the past few hours. They had seen things, experienced horrors that defied explanation, that challenged everything they thought they knew about the universe. And at the heart of it all, the orb, the artifact that had started this nightmare, that had claimed the life of their captain. It sat in the center of the bridge, its surface still pulsing with that eerie, otherworldly light. They knew deep down that the void was still in there, contained but not destroyed, that it would always be waiting, always seeking a way to escape, to spread its malevolent influence across the stars. They would have to find a way to destroy it, to ensure that nothing like this could ever happen again. But for now all they could do was hold on to each other, to the bonds of friendship and loyalty that had seen them through this darkest of trials. As the Vanguard hurtled through the void, Earth a distant promise on the horizon, the crew could only pray that Captain Mitchell's sacrifice had not been in vain, that somehow, against all odds, they would find a way to face the challenges ahead, to stand against the darkness that lurked at the heart of the universe. But even as they clung to that hope, that fragile flicker of light in the overwhelming dark, they couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that the void and the horrors it had unleashed would haunt them for the rest of their days. The Vanguard pressed on, its crew forever changed, their eyes opened to the true nature of the cosmos. They had stared into the abyss, had seen the face of an enemy older than time itself, and though they had emerged victorious, though they had sealed the void and saved countless lives, they knew that the scars of this encounter would never truly heal. They were warriors now in a war they had never asked to fight, a war against an enemy that knew no mercy, no fear, no end. But they would fight nonetheless. For Earth, for the memory of their fallen captain, for the slim chance that somewhere out there, in the vast expanse of the universe, there was still hope to be found. As the Vanguard hurtled through the void towards Earth, the crew's fragile grasp on sanity began to fray. Sleep became a rare and troubled thing, the void's malevolent whispers echoing through their dreams. They saw visions of worlds consumed, of civilizations driven mad by the darkness that lurked within the orb. Lieutenant Reed, promoted to acting captain in the wake of Mitchell's sacrifice, paced the bridge restlessly. The weight of command hung heavy on his shoulders, but it was the gnawing fear that consumed his thoughts. The orb, secure in the ship's hold, seemed to call to him, promising power and knowledge even as it threatened to devour his very soul. "We have to destroy it," Reed muttered, his eyes bloodshot and wild. "It's the only way to be sure." Sergeant Johnson, haunted by the horrors he'd witnessed on the alien ship, found himself questioning the very nature of reality. The twisted abominations, the pulsating biomechanical corridors. Had any of it been real? Or was it all just a fevered nightmare, a product of a mind pushed to the brink? He wandered the ship's halls, his gaze distant and unfocused. The once familiar corridors now seemed alien, threatening. Every shadow held a lurking horror, every sound a whisper of madness. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Chen buried himself in his work, desperate to find a way to destroy the orb and end its insidious influence. He pored over the ship's schematics, running simulation after simulation, searching for a solution that remained maddeningly out of reach. The guilt gnawed at him, a constant companion. He should have done more, should have found a way to save Captain Mitchell. The weight of his failure pressed down on him, driving him to the edge of exhaustion. As the Vanguard drew closer to Earth, the crew's descent into madness accelerated. The void's whispers grew louder, more insistent, promising release from the pain and fear that consumed them. Reed's paranoia reached a fever pitch, his every waking moment consumed by thoughts of the orb and the threat it posed. In a final, desperate act, he seized control of the ship, his mind fracturing under the weight of the void's influence. His eyes wild and his voice a ragged whisper, he set a course for the heart of the sun, convinced that only by plunging the orb into the star's fiery depths could the universe be truly saved. Johnson and Chen, realizing the extent of Reed's madness, banded together in a last-ditch effort to stop him. They confronted him on the bridge, their voices raised in a desperate plea for reason. But Reed was beyond reason, beyond saving. He lashed out, his mind consumed by the void's dark promises. In the struggle that followed, he mortally wounded Johnson, the sergeant's blood spilling across the deck plates. As Johnson lay dying in Chen's arms, he gripped the engineer's hand with the last of his strength. "Finish it," he whispered, his voice a ragged gasp. "Destroy the orb. Don't let our sacrifice be in vain." Chen nodded, tears streaming down his face. He knew what had to be done, knew that the fate of the universe rested on his shoulders. With a heavy heart, he laid Johnson's body down gently and turned to face the view screen. Earth loomed before them, a blue and green jewel against the blackness of space. But Chen's gaze was fixed on the sun, on the fiery inferno that waited to consume the orb and the evil it contained. With a final defiant cry, he set the Vanguard on a collision course with the sun, the orb secured in the ship's cargo hold. The vessel shuddered and bucked as it plunged towards the star's roiling surface, the temperature rising with each passing second. In the final moments, Chen closed his eyes, his thoughts turning to his lost crewmates. He saw their faces, felt the weight of their sacrifice, and as the Vanguard disappeared into the sun's fiery embrace, he knew that they had not died in vain. The universe would never be the same, the scars of the void's influence forever etched into the fabric of reality. But with the orb's destruction, there was a chance for healing, for hope. A chance. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.